Welcome back to Faith and Inquiry. This is Daniel and Arend. We're going to continue the conversation that we started last time. Today's topic is regarding ancient Egypt and some ideas that I was having, more questions. So here it is. I've been on a bit of a bender lately learning about ancient Egypt. What's so fascinating in relationship to this conversation is seeing the absolute dominating power their religion seemed to have over their lives. It seemed to be an incredible combination of religious propaganda, superstition, and political power plays. The power of ancient religions to organize and give purpose to societies, perhaps asking whether or not they were true, is irrelevant because they undoubtedly worked. And I'm sure many of the ancient people believed as deeply as modern believers do. So, my original reason for starting this channel was to explore why Christianity seems to work so well for Christians, but I also wanted to see why Christians think they are right and their beliefs are true. But considering how well other religions seem to have worked in the past, can the raw practical functionality of a religion be a sign of its validity? And that raises another question for me. Does it even matter if it's true? Also, it seems that for religion to be effective, belief is required, but that belief naturally excludes other beliefs, which sets us up for conflict, like what we have going on between Iran, Israel, and the United States. So, these religions from the past, extremely powerful, extremely sophisticated, organized society, and again, with the ancient Egyptians, it's just something that I've been learning about a lot. Clearly, they achieved incredible things, and their religion was a huge aspect of their lives. And, you know, it wasn't just like they would go to church or go to temple or whatever they would do. It was a way of organizing everything, absolutely everything. It was their culture, right? It wasn't an aspect of their culture. It was their culture. And that extreme religious fervor, you know, it led to some of the most incredible architecture and art that the world has ever seen. So obviously at least enough of them thought it was true. The question is, does it even matter? Does it even matter if it was true? Was it right? It did things for them. And then how does that relate? What do you think about how that relates to Christianity? Because I see Christians living better lives than a lot of other people I see who are not Christians, right? In terms of their moral conviction, the choices that they make in their lives. I just don't know if it's true, right? So it seems to be effective. So what's more important? Is it more important that it's effective, or is it more important that it's true? What do you think?
No, I think truth. Well, there are a lot of things that could be effective even temporarily. Like, for instance, you could use medication that you get from a psychiatrist to temporarily fix the symptoms of an underlying problem that relates to, let's say, depression. And the root problem is never really, truly addressed, but temporarily you could experience a sense of, relief. Where the truth is that, okay, the person is depressed because they're anxious, because they maybe just need to, let go of past trauma or burdens that they're carrying, or, it's definitely has a spiritual inclination. Everything has a spiritual inclination because that's where everything started. That's where everything came from, and that's where a lot of stuff happens that people don't see, that dictate their everyday life, and yet they not everybody is as observant to these spiritual realities. I think when you talk about maybe Egypt, I don't know that much about what they worshipped and so on. But from my perspective, it's merely idolatry, because they were worshipping the Nile as a god. They would worship the sun as a god. They would worship the underworld, as a god. So it's like all of these aspects of like creation that they would worship. I'm not sure if there was a moon god as well, but I do know there's Osiris, there's I can't remember the name of the Nile god. So the concept of idolatry basically came from, when you look back at even the Israelites, they would start to worship the work of their own hands. That's like what the Bible refers to. The Torah says, they worship the work of their hands. Now, there were pharaohs who, I believe some of them actually did believe in God. Not all of them, but there was a massive, definitely, idolatry. Like, look at what I can build. Look at this grandiose, representation of some kind of, I don't know, desert god. All these different things, the Sphinx and all of that. So
It's the propaganda.
The reality is
that political propaganda. I mean, it's so obvious. You look at these things and you see the pharaoh, towering above his enemies, represented as a god. And who knows what people actually thought. You got to know that there were some people who truly believed that, and other people were probably like, nah, and sorry to interrupt here, but this I think is critical to what we're talking about. Obviously ancient Egypt was a long-lasting, durable civilization, went on for thousands of years, and the religion did change, and they went through religious revolutions, where their culture fell apart, people stopped believing, and things just deteriorated and completely crumbled, and then it was reborn. And like you said, there's this propaganda element to it, and inevitably some of the pharaohs used it just as a narcissist would use any power that they have. But the point is that it doesn't even matter if it was true. People went along with it, and it had incredible results, right? Whether you want to call it idolatry or just, cults of personality, it was so damn effective. I mean, I've just been looking at pictures of the pyramids and just thinking about what that would take to put that together, right? The amount of organization, time, labor, planning, and the sheer will to just stack millions of enormous blocks for no pay. They weren't paid. There was no money. There was no money in ancient Egypt. It was barter. The people were just given food and shelter, and they were fed well. They were treated well, according to what modern archaeology says. But what does it take to get them to actually do that? Right? They got to see those pharaohs truly as gods to do such things, right? And any ideas that we have now about money, compensation, didn't even matter. Like, I was thinking, what would it take to simply carve out, like, I was looking at pictures of inside the Great Pyramid of Khufu, and there's a lot of impressive, ridiculous engineering feats that were accomplished there, but simply the granite block that is the entrance, the granite block that covers the entrance to the burial chamber is enormous, perfectly cut, right? I was trying to think, what monetary value can you put on quarrying a stone of granite that big, shipping it up the Nile, because it came from Aswan, which is far away from Giza, right? So they had to cut it out of the mountain, drag it to a boat, put it on the boat, move it up the river, drag it off the boat, bring it to the pyramid site, cut it perfectly, and then position the damn thing perfectly. Just what would be the value of that one stone today? Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this one thing. And it was millions of these stones that were moved like that. What were these people believing in so strongly, so zealously, that they said, yeah, this is a good idea. We're going to make this a project for our society, right? And if it was religious conviction that did it, it doesn't even matter if it was true. And I'm sure there are modern, and I don't know what you think. I mean, I don't believe in the Egyptian gods. Do you?
I do.
You believe in the gods? Okay. What do you mean? Like, you think that they're extant entities in this universe? That's not something I knew about you.
So
I'm kind of going.
Even demons believe in Jesus and tremble. So the fact, I do not deny their existence. They do exist. So I believe in them. I believe they do exist. Do I follow what they teach? You know, that's a different story. From my perspective, when you look at most ancient religions, you can pair them up with each other, and they have a lot of similarities. Like for instance, when you take Odin and you take Zeus, and you look at their qualities, and you look at the star signs and all these things. It's, from my perspective, I haven't done a lot of research on this, but I have started to, look at these patterns and things, and I could see that, there are like so many similarities that it's literally almost like you have a brand, and then you have like all these white label. It's the same brand, but now it's got a different name. Now it's got a different thing, but it's the same spirit that is working. So I mean, for instance, when you look at, like, for instance, when it comes to abortion, the same spirit that's behind it, the same spirit that made people sacrifice children all those years back. So I definitely do believe they do exist. I definitely know that they weren't delusional. So did these things do things for them? Well, some people go so far as to say that even the pyramids might probably have been built by giants or the spirits of giants. I don't know. There's some crazy stuff out there that I don't necessarily, I can't prove it, but it's interesting stuff that people are thinking about. There's also this person that he has a theory that the actual pyramids were actually built to generate electricity.
I've heard these theories, yeah.
And so when you look at it, it's almost like if you had to look at like modern day society, and you're like a super advanced civilization way ahead of that. Let's imagine everything is like probably like overcrowded, but design would probably be like super minimal, super like simple, just because of the overload of information and technology that the future will have. When you would look back to today, they might look at a cell phone tower and say, oh, they were worshipping the sky god, or they were doing something. Why were they using this metal, and they could have like, so like when your technology starts to change so much that it becomes unrecognizable, I think what is like religious and spiritual and what is like on the side of technology, kind of those lines can blur. So it's difficult to say, okay, I think what makes it spiritual is like, okay, well, the pharaoh was buried inside the pyramid, so why would the pharaoh be needed to be buried inside a pyramid when it was originally used to generate electricity, as underwater rivers would flow underneath it? But what did they do with that electricity? There's no like
what light bulb
what would they power? What would they do with that? So and also the fact that these are placed in certain positions of stars. You do know that probably. So at certain positions these pyramids are placed. So you could look at like a what are they call it, observatories, right, where you look at the stars through a telescope. If you're a future civilization looking back, you'd be like, what sorcery is this? They're doing stuff with the stars. Sure. It could possibly be just like grandiose and just markers, almost like the Statue of Liberty. When you think about it, what's the purpose of that? Does that represent a god? Some people do. Some people say it actually represents a specific god. But it's just like a national, thing. So I think behind it could probably just be a lot of pride. You think about it.
But I think what I'm trying to get at here is that, I mean, This is what I said to my kids the other day. Can you imagine being the guy to put the last block on the Great Pyramid? How awesome that must have been. How satisfying and incredible an achievement to do such a thing. And the next thought is, how much did that validate their beliefs in their religion, right? That their pharaoh, who was considered a god, well, again, it goes depending on the time period. I don't know if Old Kingdom pharaohs were considered gods. Maybe they were. But they put that last block in. I'm sure it was a huge celebration, and then they can just stand there and admire and marvel at what they've done. And how much then does that validate their beliefs in their religion, which is also their entire culture, right? And you can't then imagine going up to one of those workers or the priests or anybody and trying to introduce them to Jesus at that point. And you're saying, oh, there's this other religion and there's this other God, and it's the one God, and it's a different system here. Forget about what you guys just did. The greatest the greatest architectural achievement of mankind. There's this other thing I want you to learn about. Like, do you think they would buy it? After what they just did? I mean, I would have, if I were on, one of those work crews moving those blocks around, and then we finish it and we look at it, I think I would have a really hard time buying into any other religion, anything than what we just did. You know what I'm saying? What do you think?
I think when you read about Moses and Aaron and what God put them through just to get Pharaoh to allow the Israelites to worship the Lord their God, I think you have the answer. He was not interested, and inevitably he was drowned. Him and all his chariots were drowned as the Israelites passed through the Red Sea. So that was a rejection of if they accepted the beliefs of the Israelites, I think that would probably be a different story. So there is a different story in the Bible, and that's there were other pharaohs that would treat Israelites with kindness, and I think it was, I don't know the name of the pharaoh, but it was with Jacob, that pharaoh gave them land and all of that. So there I guess there is a theory that pharaoh might have actually believed in God. So but that's just speculation. We don't know that. So throughout the ages there's been different types of pharaohs, but mostly, yes, they would be seen as the supreme authority. And I don't think it would be easy for any person who has built up some kind of belief in something to just give it up, especially if there's, like, let's say, money connected to it. If you've built up like a whole empire and all of a sudden you have to let it go because it doesn't align with Christianity, I think that's pretty normal for people not to give it up. The reality is you can even believe in the you can even worship. So to believe in the devil, in his existence, that's one thing, but to worship him, he can give you money. It always comes at a price, and the price is always usually destruction. So I definitely don't doubt that that's possible. So if you believe in other gods, they can also reward you. But I think the question would be, what's the cost? What would it be the cost of it? By the way that Pharaoh was judged by God, having him drown in the Red Sea because of his own pride, he basically drowned himself. He was so stubborn and prideful, he drowned himself. That just reminds me that pride leads to the fall. As it's written in various parts, and in Proverbs it says that pride leads to the fall. He fell. Where was his gods? They didn't save him. I think that says a lot, about God and some other, lowercase g gods. So, yeah, it's you can believe in a god with a, not like the god above all gods, I guess the question would be, what is the price that you pay after what you receive? Is it true or is it false? So you can receive lies or the truth. You can base your whole life on a lie. You can build a whole empire that's just like based on a.
I'm really glad that you're saying that, because when I look at this again, just thinking about the Great Pyramid, and there's like 13 or 14 pyramids, major pyramids that have been found, and a ton of smaller ones. The price that these people paid, I'm sure they had injuries and all kinds of different accidents could happen. I mean, probably extremely dangerous work, but the reward that they got, I mean, they were well fed. This is according to archaeology. We found the workers' villages outside of the pyramids, and we can see their bones. They were, they had repetitive strain injuries and all that, broken bones and stuff that you'd expect, but we can also see that they were extremely well fed and well cared for, which doesn't seem to line up with what the Bible says. But it didn't seem like, besides the injuries, there was a heavy price to be paid. If anything, the reward of national pride and the validation of your belief system seemed greater than any price that these people paid. I don't know, I'm just speculating. But again, from what you're saying, it's like this just validates that religion, or verifies that religion more to me. I'm not saying I believe in it, I'm just saying I could see how it would be a validating and verifying factor for the people doing it. Again, it didn't seem like, and who knows, but it didn't seem like the price was that steep, right? Like they got something and there wasn't hell to pay. But what do I know? I don't know. What do you think?
So I think when it comes to what the Bible says about how they treated, like I said, some of the Israelites, some of them they treated really well. They gave them land. They made them like shepherds. They fed them, all of that. It was later, years later, like it says, there came a pharaoh that wasn't that way. Let me actually see if I can find it.
I'm just thinking of the story of Exodus. That's the one that I know, where the
I think when you look at the movies and stuff, you can have maybe a perspective on it that might not be like super accurate. So there was a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. So the new king came, he didn't know, and he oppressed the Israelites. That doesn't mean their own people wouldn't be well fed and taken care of. It was the Israelites, and there's no evidence of that because they left, right? So it would make sense that you're not really going to find like the remains of Israelites because they left very long ago. So, but just to put that into perspective, as far as I know, so you're talking about a price to pay?
Yeah, I mean, this is what your premise was, that if you're dealing with these other gods, these other entities, that there is a price to pay, that they can give you things.
Oh, yeah.
This is your claim, right? That they can give you things, they can give you money, wealth, whatever, but eventually you do have to pay the piper, right?
Yeah, it's almost like a loan. You never truly own it. When you look at I think this is maybe a more modern day take on what could be considered pharaohs and lowercase g gods. When you look at some celebrities, how they commit suicide, what's the famous, the 27 Club, those people.
Yeah, Kurt Cobain
committed suicide. Michael Jackson and
wait, Michael Jackson.
Even that
50?
Well, they found, I don't know.
He took some.
Yeah, and then Johan Johansson, he was also a composer. So but interestingly, Johan Johansson actually was very obsessed with Egyptian gods. Interestingly, but this guy also, he overdosed on cocaine and something else. I think that's actually a very good example of the price that you pay. So you could see he was into all the Egyptian stuff and Egyptian gods and those things. So the reality is they do get fame, they do get money, they do get influence, but at the end of the day, the weight is so much that they cannot bear it by themselves. So I think it's just like it's like you're prideful, and then your pride just inflates even more, and eventually it crushes you. They did horrible human sacrifices in Egypt, by the way. There's a lot of history that proves that. It doesn't say that 100% of Egypt is evil. I think it's when you look at it through the lens of like modern day society. Look at like a city now, and you take that city, compare it to Egypt. I think when you look through those lens, you will start to kind of think about things like more like these people weren't aliens. Like, let's be a little bit more real about it. If you were living in those times, you might have been different, but think about it like, hey, these were people. They actually lived here. They might have had different beliefs. Maybe it was just the Pharaoh and his followers that was like obsessed with these stuff. Maybe it was an underground cult. And all these things that we discover now are like underground stuff that maybe the rest of society didn't know about. Who knows? Because the reason why I say this, because they were kind of in a position where they had to worship the Pharaoh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you think about it, what good would it be if they were worshipping all these other gods that was competing with Pharaoh? That doesn't really make sense to me, if you get what I'm saying. So it almost feels like it's an underground thing, and then what the people saw was this person that they would then bow down to worship. So it's a little bit different than other religions where people were forced to bow down to Baal and so on. But the worship fell like on Pharaoh, and they did see him as a god.
So let me try to summarize what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding. That the worship, what you think is maybe what was happening is outwardly the people were doing what was expected. They would bow down to the Pharaoh, whatever the priests were saying, but perhaps behind closed doors or in the privacy of their own hearts and minds, they may have had other
different beliefs. Yeah.
I mean, isn't that exactly what's probably happening everywhere around the world now? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me every time go ahead.
You can continue.
Yeah. And this is what's so fascinating to me as a non-believer, is that every time I talk to a believer, I get a different version of religion. It seems like there are as many versions of religion as there are people on this planet. Now, it might not be hugely different, right? If you get people from the same church, the same temple, but I've heard them say like, "Oh yeah, I don't really believe in that," right? "Oh, we go to the temple every single weekend. I hate when they do this one thing." Right? And then someone else, "Oh, I love when we do this, ritual," whatever they're doing. So I don't know. I don't know how to square this, It just seems like it's all so personal, and people just pick and choose whatever they want to do to validate their own predetermined beliefs that they simply came up with. And that doesn't give me a sense that we're any closer to what the truth actually is. And that's what I want to find. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I get Christians that if they don't like what the pastor is saying to them, they find somebody that says what they want to hear, and that's also something that's already been spoken about in the future. That's how people will be. They will heap up for themselves teachers, with itching ears. With their itching ears, they want to hear what pleases them, instead of hearing the truth. So you can do your own thing and this and that and have all these traditions and extra stuff, but inevitably, with my belief, it's all about Jesus. And if it's not all about Jesus, it's just religious. It's just a religious mess, ritual and all of that, and that doesn't accomplish anything. So it's unfortunately that's the case. The other case is also that we believe in the body of Christ, so signifying that the church is his body and he's in heaven, he's the head. So when you think about the hand and the foot, they're not really gonna work the same. They're gonna be different, right? They're gonna be different parts of the body doing different things, different functions. Somebody might have a function to pray, like, for instance, praying for nations or praying for presidents. Another person cannot fathom that. They just like whatever. They just want to help poor people, and they focus on that. They help poor people on the street. Another group would be focused on, let's say, evangelizing to teenagers, and that's their mission. And collectively, everything is working together. Everybody's kind of doing their job, and it's like an army, and every person has their own station. So I think it's important to ask yourself, who am I, and where do I fit in? Like, what's my, where should I go? What's the direction that I need to take? What's my purpose? What am I good with? What am I, what's my talents that I was born with? Those things. So a lot of things that you like from your childhood and so on gives a lot of a strong indication of where you fit in. And some people just don't fit in. So you do get, like these small groups of Christians. They just don't fit in with anybody. They're just doing their own thing, and they have a relationship with God, and that's great. And then you also get cults, people that misuse it. You get false pastors, false preachers, false prophets, and so on. So it's and like you said, when you look at Egypt, I mean, it's like look at how things are today. It's kind of the same thing. Egypt back then was like a capital city. It was like New York, right? It was like this big place that you can visit. It's like Rome, it's this grand, almost like Saudi Arabia, Dubai kind of vibe. Maybe people went there for vacations. I don't know.
People did.
They don't. There's not a lot of stuff written down about that, I guess, but it's just an ancient city, and I believe people. Yeah, so just because the president might be a witch doctor or visit witch doctors, like in South Africa, he claims to be a Christian, but let's say he visits witch doctors, which I cannot prove. That doesn't make this a nation of witch doctors or like witchcraft. Predominantly there are Christians. And it's interesting when you look back in history, Jesus actually went to Egypt with his parents to hide from Herod. So he was not in danger, and Jews were clearly not in danger back then. So it was almost like Egypt was a sanctuary back then, when you think about it. Which is interesting. Why would he go and hide there? So I look at Egypt as like it's just a city. Okay, the people have done some great things, but okay, look at Disneyland. What are you going to say the year 2100 when you look back at Disneyland? Oh, there's the whatever god, and then it's a massive statue of Shrek.
Yeah.
So what about entertainment? Okay, look, entertainment can be a false god. It can be like a thing that you're so obsessed with, like it's your whole life. It almost becomes like a religion, like people are obsessed with Star Wars, which is a great story, but some of them are like really like not fans but fanatics. So what about that? What about just like stories and folklore and that stuff? And we look at it and we're like, ooh, it's this god and that god, and what if it's like just a character in a story? Who knows?
I think about that exact perspective a lot, and it just keeps grinding my gears. Like, yeah, I mean, anybody can deify anything, and once you do that, you can elevate it, worship it, pray to it, and inevitably you're going to get outcomes. Right? If you're just going about your life, unless you're locked up in your room, you're going to get outcomes, good and bad, for whatever it is that you are doing. And let's say I deify Mickey Mouse, and I put an altar here in my room to Mickey Mouse, and I sacrifice, I don't know, what would I sacrifice? Cats to Mickey Mouse?
Mice,
right? Which it's funny. I mean,
cats.
The Egyptians had this this cult to cats that got really popular right when the Greeks, when the whole thing was coming down, right? And archaeologists have found thousands upon thousands of mummified cats and mummified cat parts, like not even a whole cat. But they were clearly desperate and trying to rely on whatever they thought was the old ways of doing things to maybe revive their culture and prevent the Greeks from taking over. And it didn't work. But going back, like if I have my Mickey Mouse altar here and I do some ritual and then I make a request and then I go out into the world and it comes true, did I just create a god that granted my wish or granted my prayers? Like, tell me about this.
I think that's an interesting way of asking the question, because there's people that worship the works of their own hands, so the stuff they created they worshipped. But I mean, all ideas come from somewhere. So, well, I guess if your request gets answered, it doesn't necessarily mean it was Mickey Mouse who did it. It might have just been some other entity that said, okay, well, let's inhabit that, because let's use this opportunity, because clearly he's serious about that specific thing. So so when you look at the devil, he's referred to as the father of all lies. Jesus referred to him as the father of lies. So he's full of lies. So whatever's a lie, he's going to capitalize on that. So clearly, making Mickey Mouse your god, that is a lie, because that was not the original intent. And so so clearly Satan, the father of all lies, would he would inhabit that. He would capitalize on using that as an opportunity. But anything evil comes from evil. Anything good comes from God, inevitably. That's what I believe. So let's say, like for instance, let's use the example of Star Wars. George Lucas says he was trying to tell a story about God from his perspective, which was interesting. Most movies have this struggle between good and evil. When you look at like Lord of the Rings as well, a lot of symbolism there points to a Christ figure. When you look at Gandalf, when you look at Aragorn, when you look at these different characters in the story, when I watch that, I can see something symbolic being said. So I think perhaps people could get stuck in worshipping the symbols instead of looking further and reading what's actually being said, using the symbols. So
yeah, I mean, that type of those archetypal symbols show up in all kinds of religions and cultures throughout history, right? And I don't know, was it Jung who wanted to say that these are sort of just features of our psychology? I don't know if that's right, but it seems like it is, right? And then even just going back to the Egyptian discussion, Osiris was resurrected. He was the first one to go to the underworld and be brought back, just like Jesus, right? There's a god called Set that was sort of the devil. And actually the word Satan comes from Set, who was an ancient Egyptian god, and it was probably borrowed by the Hebrews or, changed in some way. But these features of our mind just seem to be permanent. They're just part of the way we view things and the way we process information. I don't know why, but it just seems to be that way. But it seems to yield similar results, similar outcomes in psychology, and then it sort of dribbles out into culture, and then that gets, kind of congeals into religion that then reflects the time and the place and the people and the culture. But again, I don't know what to make of that. And I also don't know what to make of it when someone says, oh, but the way I'm viewing it is the right way. You see what I mean? Because everybody thinks it's the right way. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there are like even books written by other people that weren't the disciples that just told a bunch of lies about Jesus. And when you look at the Bible, when you look at cross references in the Bible, how many cross references there are? There's like this visual graph that shows the consistency of what's being conveyed, that it all connects. When you have 40 different authors, I don't know how many, there's like quite a few, they write each their own thing, but it all kind of comes together. I mean, that's kind of impossible. How does that work across a long period of time? Then you get other places where there's like, okay, there's this dude, or there's that dude, or this dude, or like when you combine all the manuscripts of like Greek mythology, it's nothing compared to what's been, discovered from the Torah and from the Bible. So the Bible, the Torah, has the most manuscripts that they ever found in history. So it's interesting, There's usually like limited amount of information on this and on this secret thing and on this secret thing and that thing and all these other beliefs. And like you said, now okay, so you said Osiris died, he was resurrected and all of that. Well, I don't know. The thing is, I could write a story now about a god I believe in that died and resurrected, and it's a total BS, nonsense. You can turn on the news now and listen to somebody tell like, terrible lies about somebody that's completely not true and convince a whole nation. But the question is, what is the outcome of that belief? When it comes to the Egyptian stuff, it's very just focused on, let's just be honest, money and me having food to eat. Like that's kind of.
It wasn't money. It may have been wealth, but not in the form of money. They didn't have money. It was barter.
It might be. Yeah, well, like what I mean by money is by wealth. That was like the main motive. So that is supported in the Bible, because the Bible says you cannot worship God and Mammon. You would worship the one and despise the other. So you would either worship wealth or God. And so I think that's a great example for this idolatry and stuff, is when people start worshiping the provision instead of the provider. It's kind of like, I don't know, it happened to everybody. It happened to all the Israelites. It happened to Solomon. He fell into that trap. So I'd even say that possibly way at the beginning, the first pharaohs, might have fully believed in God, and idolatry just crept in, and all of these other stuff, came in. If you look at like the story of Osiris and all of that, that could also be like a symbolic reference. Somebody, I don't know, maybe they were reading the stars and then they saw something and it was actually pointing to Jesus, but then, there was like some kind of a confusion or whatever. Or somebody came in and rewrote it. Look at what Xi Jinping is doing. He's trying to rewrite the Bible. I don't know. So the thing about lies is, look at the outcome. You would always see the result, of that religion. There were a lot of religious figures that, on their deathbed, they said, the one said, I am not the way. The other one said this, I do not know for sure. And every single one of them was like very like, they don't really know. But, when it comes to Christianity, those are really the only ones that, they have this peace and this assurance that when you look at that, it's different. It's just different. They don't have this sense of like, okay, what's going to happen when I die? And they also don't, strap bombs to themselves and run into people, because that in itself says enough. That's the result of the religion. So you will know a tree by its fruit. You have to look at the fruit. What's the fruit? What's the fruit really? Not what you want. Like, people sometimes look at it and they say they see what they want to see. But they should really reflect on that. Look at the fruit. That when you eat the fruit of the tree, what's the effect? Is it good? Is it bad? That will speak for itself. A nation that is under communism, the people are oppressed, right? Their poverty is rampant. A lot of stuff going wrong. You can see it by the fruit that communism doesn't work. And to the communists, everything's working. They're the greatest people alive, and there's portraits of them everywhere. It sounds a lot like what some pharaohs did.
Sounds a lot like modern day Los Angeles.
It sounds a lot like communism.
Yeah, you got half of the people here thinking that this city is like some kind of paradise, and you got the other half of people just trying to get the hell out of here because it's like a hell on earth, and we just can't see eye to eye. I mean, we're living in the same place, seeing the same stuff, and the answers to the questions are completely different, and our conclusions are just radically
clashes.
Yeah, radically divided. Absolutely. Like, we're seeing, I don't know. It's so strange. It is so strange to see this, that we're all here in this city, and the conclusions that people are coming to couldn't be further apart, ideologically speaking. I don't know what to make of it. It's tough.
Yeah, so I mean, the higher ups, the people in authority and so on, they could be doing well, but you will see the fruit. You will see the other people suffering. That would say a lot. If the whole nation is prospering, that would say something completely different. There's one guy that said the results that he found after revivals break out, when people gave their life to Jesus in masses, usually innovation followed, technological advances and those kind of things. So it's kind of funny. And then what's ironic is, after those advances, people can then turn and then worship the work of their hands. They just forget about God, and everybody has done it to a certain degree. I mean, I don't think about God 100% of the whole day, 24/7. Sometimes I do forget, and that's when I, step into areas where I shouldn't and make mistakes and so on. So everybody is prone to, idolatry. And basically that comes down to you just worship any God that's not the true God, and that's the whole thing. Now,
what I'm trying to get at here is, how do you know? How do you know which is the true one?
That's again,
why did there even have to be one?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing is, I think desperation will inevitably drive every person to answers and to find truth. I think if you're desperate enough to get out of your, like all of your ways that are imperfect, and you just get fed up enough with it, you will ultimately find him. I mean, I think by all means try whatever, but what's the results? If you're trying something and you're fascinated by it, but you look extremely exhausted and your eyes are red, I think this is not having a good effect on you, so maybe don't venture down that path, try something else. So it's also not just about feelings. It's also not just about looking good and being perfect all the time, because, tribulation does come and things do happen. But ultimately you will see a result in the behavior, you will see the fruit. And it's up to the person to then just approach the tree and start eating. And that eating is just the act of, okay, I'm receiving this information. I'm accepting it. That's literally all it is. So it's like I said, it's like a table that God sets before you. It's up to you to choose if you want to eat or not. You don't have to eat it, but that's literally how you receive it. It's like digesting, information, receiving information and believing it. And a lot of people can, like I said, you can turn on the news and believe a lot of crap. What's the results? If you're behaving like a maniac, I think there's your answer. If you spend a lot of time on one thing and it makes you depressed, there's the fruit, So the outcome will speak for itself. The evidence, the results.
Sure. I mean, the way it looks to me over here, that whatever outcomes are happening in Los Angeles at the moment with these riots, it seems like it is emboldening people, right?
Exactly.
It's not like they're not, yeah, they're not looking at this and saying, well, some people are saying these people are nuts. Why would you, burn police cars and throw cinder blocks? How is that going to help you achieve your goal? And then other people see it and say, hey, let's go grab some more cinder blocks and make another Molotov cocktail. So clearly the fruit of these trees tastes different to different people. I mean, could I just mention what we were doing before we started recording, if you don't mind? Yeah, I was just listening to you talking to, was it, how many people did you say?
Handful of people? One other guy, yeah.
Yep. Just listen, you were reading from the Bible, you were speaking in tongues, right? And I was just trying to take it in, and I mean, it was interesting. I definitely want to sit through another one if you'll have me. But again, if this is the fruit of the tree that's being brought to me, and I take a bite, I don't even know what I'm biting into. It just honestly doesn't. It doesn't have any flavor at all. It's like biting into something. Like there, I just bit into it. You see, there's nothing there to me, at least. And I am struggling to understand how someone else is saying, "Look at this delicious, thing that you can eat, and it will nourish your spirit." And more, it's more than that. It's not just nourishing to your spirit. It's providing the answers, with a capital A, the answers, right? And to me, I'm thinking, I don't even see what it is you're doing. Honestly, I don't get it. I don't get it. So then what?
In some way, I used to be very frustrated with God, the way that he kind of veils things, where things are not totally revealed and it doesn't really completely make sense. And what he says is basically, it says that it's foolishness to those who are perishing. So, but for believers, for Christians, it makes perfect sense. And it's in a way that, like, God is kind of speaking Morse code, I guess. But there's truth in it, even when you look at it, from a psychological perspective. I know Jordan Peterson started reading the Bible like that, from a very non-spiritual perspective, which was strange. The stuff that he came up with, I had never thought about in my life. Some of it's so complicated, I don't completely understand what he's saying. I think a lot of people don't, and they pretend to be very intellectual, but I think he's got his circles and professors that he talks to. But he had these interesting symbolisms and stuff that he found in there, which was really interesting, and it's true, it makes sense. So it says, 1 Corinthians 1 verse 18 says, for the message of the cross, a man dying for the sins of others, to those who are perishing, it is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. So, think about it. Like, what's a more foolish thing to do than, to willingly go and die on a cross? That's basically, sounds almost like suicide. And that gets people's attention, where they're like, what? He didn't harm anybody, but why would he go and die? Why? And it's annoying, and people just can't seem to get beyond that point, unless those who have, who understand it, who receive it, who realize that they have this dependency on, somebody to save them. There's a lot of people that say, I see they comment online, like it basically comes down to somebody needs to pay, for the mess we're in. That's usually like the kind of the when you boil everything down, when you look at all the problems in society and stuff like that, usually get down to that exact point, like somebody has to answer, because this is a mess. And that is exactly the thing where, one man had to die for the sins of of others, one that was perfect. But to somebody who does not see their sin as sin and they enjoy their life, it's foolishness. Why do they need it? Because they're not convicted. Look, they're living their lives the way they want, walking over everybody, just being selfish. Why would they need that? It's only when that person's eyes open up and they start seeing, what a mess it is and what a mess their life really is, that they realize they need it. So it's something that has to be revealed to you. And the Bible says, ask and you will receive. If you've never asked anything from God, it's not going to happen. If you never get to the actual point of saying, God, if you're out there, open this up for me, that's at least the first step. It wasn't all revealed to me immediately when I kind of went wayward. I was blinded. I was blinded by all my sin and all the stuff and all the spiritual issues that I had. It definitely does blind you. So I couldn't see it, and I can understand that. I was also in a church service where I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what they were talking about, but yet I just kept on going. And something in me I just felt like, just keep on doing this, it's okay, it's okay, just keep going. And that's what I did. Eventually I got tired of it and I wanted to see proof. I wanted to understand what's going on. And things became clearer just as you take steps forward. It's not like something you just step into, everything makes sense. It's like if two people are playing chess and you don't know what's going on, it's going to look senseless to you. You're going to think, this is stupid. What are they doing? But there's something going on. What's going on here, and you want to figure it out. And once you figure it out, okay, it makes sense.
Sure.
But you can't say now, okay, chess is rubbish because it doesn't make sense.
Right,
you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, you got to move. You got to get in and play a little bit so you can see what it's all about. But you can't, looking from the outside, It's just these people are moving these funny shaped pieces around on the checkerboard, and
something you have to investigate. I think a lot of stuff in Christianity seems very offensive and very crazy and out there on purpose.
You think on purpose?
And I don't think it's the people. I think it's God that designed it that way to get people's attention, because it's so against culture and so it's strange, right? Let's be honest. It's very strange stuff to believe that you eat somebody's body and drink their blood, and now that's somehow a good thing. Think about it. That's crazy. That's like human sacrifice. I don't want to eat somebody's body and drink their blood. But it was a spiritual contract that you make. So it's not actually a physical thing that happens. It is, his body was physically destroyed, but spiritually you receive a new body. You can connect to his body that is in heaven right now and receive his holiness. You can receive his righteousness. You can receive everything that he starved himself of. You can receive that and become that. And the blood just, that's a sign of a new covenant, that you're stepping out of the old covenant. So when Adam and Eve sinned, when Eve sinned and pulled Adam into the mess because they were married, God provided a sacrifice. So he made them clothing out of the skin of an animal. And that was the first time that he provided a sacrifice, because the reality is that sin needed to be destroyed, and that was the problem. Because sin could not be removed unless somebody paid for it. Unless somebody paid for the injustice, it could not be, it could not be removed. So what initially had to be done is the priest would lay his hands on a goat, and then the goat would be sent out of the camp. They won't kill the goat, they just send it out into the desert to go to the desert god Azazel, the god of destruction. And then the other goat would be slaughtered. That was what happened. So symbolically, Jesus took the place of both the goats. the one that was slaughtered, and the one that took all the sin as well.
So it's like a balancing mechanism almost.
It's and the reason why God had to do it is because it just required continual. I mean, it's just blood, and animals just, they ate the sacrifices. Okay, so the priests did eat the sacrifices and so on, but it wasn't sustainable. So there had to be a way to reconcile it once and for all. And what a better way for God to become man and to once and for all pay for all sin. And it's like it's an eternal covenant. It's not temporary. You can keep on receiving forgiveness. So I found when I came to the end of myself, that's when I found God. So when I was suicidal and depressed, I decided not to commit suicide, but I rather decided to die to my own opinions and to surrender to Him. And that's all I did. That's what the Christian faith, it's very simple actually, is if you confess with your mouth and you believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is your Lord and He saved you, you're saved. That's it. It's so stupid. It's ridiculous. It's really not that hard. But to get to that point, it's, keep on searching, keep on asking, keep on knocking. The right moment comes for each person. I've seen it. For some, it comes years later. Some go away and let's say 50 years later, they remember and it comes back to them, and then they actually, they receive Christ. Now, for instance, Michael Jackson apparently asked for one producer to pray for him just before he passed away. So he gave his life to Jesus just before he went, because he realized, I might have a 777 on my sleeve and all these things and say God bless you, but he was doing things out of his own strength. He was not relying on the person that provided a way into holiness. So in essence, it's just a way to actually get to God is through Jesus Christ, and that's the only way. But Jesus Christ Himself is also God. It just simplifies everything. So instead of now going to this, and then you have to worship the mountain god, and then the river god, and then this, come on. Imagine you're in India, millions of gods. There's just one. And it says it's the name above all names, and every tongue will eventually confess and bend the knee. And that's Jesus Christ. So it's both God and man, but it's one. Mm-hmm. And it just makes things so much easier. It's so much simpler. You don't have to sacrifice a goat every Sunday. The spiritual gifts are given for free. I didn't have to be sprinkled with the blood of some whatever. Or sacrifice a chicken on the mountain for some demon to give me money. That's also a thing.
Right.
There's always the sacrifice element that God said now is done away with. The only sacrifice you make is yourself. You bend your knees, and it says that you are baptized into the death of Christ and then resurrected in Him. So it's like in that moment spiritually you time travel, and you actually hang on the cross with Him, and all your sins goes away, and then you get resurrected with Him into heaven. That's what actually happens, minus the pain, minus the suffering, minus all these things.
Yeah.
And the Bible says take up your cross daily. It's something that you decide daily to die to your own opinions.
There's a lot that I wanted to mention about that, but perhaps we need to save it for the next episode. It's interesting that you brought up that, the streamlining of these religious or spiritual practices. Just again on the note on what we talked about with ancient Egypt, there was at least one pharaoh, there may have been other ones, that attempted to make a monotheistic change to their national belief system, and I guess the priests really hated that, and after that pharaoh died, they basically erased all of that. It was King Tut's father, Akhenaten, and I don't know if the people hated it or just the people in power hated it, right? Maybe the priests were like, hey, we got a pretty cushy thing going here, let's not rock the boat. and he did it anyway. Who knows? Who knows? But I don't know enough about it. But yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. Anything else you want to add? But I think we should end it there, and there's going to be plenty more to talk about.
Good.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
That was, as always, really enjoyable, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.